Have you ever trusted someone so deeply that you handed them the keys to your life? Not just your car keys, not just something small, but something that carried your future, your savings, your peace of mind. And then one day, that trust was shattered. I've sat on this bench for many years. I've heard stories about broken contracts, unpaid loans, damaged property. But what hurts people the most is rarely the money, it's betrayal. Before I begin today's story, if you believe in fairness, responsibility, and personal accountability, take a moment to subscribe. This channel is where we talk about real life, real consequences, and real lessons that stay with you. Now, let me tell you about a woman who simply tried to be kind. She walked into my courtroom quietly, mid-30s, soft-spoken, neat, the kind of woman who looks like she double-checks her grocery list before leaving the house. The kind who volunteers at church and remembers birthdays. She stood at the plaintiff's table, hands folded, shoulders slightly tense. Across from her stood a man she once called a friend. He didn't look at her. That told me a lot. "Ma'am," I said gently, "how do you know the defendant?" She took a breath. "He plays drums at my church. We've known each other for a few years." Church, friendship, community. Those words mean something, especially to people over 50. You grow up believing those bonds matter. They mean safety. They mean trust. I asked, "Did you ever date?" She shook her head quickly. "No, Your Honor." "So this was just friendship?" "Yes." And then we got to the heart of it. He had borrowed her car. Not once, not twice, a few times over the years. Just favors. Nothing formal, no written agreement, no payment, just kindness. You see, she still had a loan on that car, a big one. It wasn't luxury. It wasn't flashy. It was reliable. It was her way to get to work, to pay bills, to live independently. On March 22nd, she let him borrow it again. He dropped her off at work that morning. Normal day, routine, ordinary. And that's how most disasters begin, as ordinary days. Around 2 p.m., she was on her lunch break when her phone rang. It was him. His voice was shaking. The car was stolen, he told her. Stolen. Those words hit like ice water. She said she felt her heart sink into her stomach. That car wasn't just transportation. It was tied to her credit, her stability, her future. She told him calmly, "Call the police. I'll call the insurance company." That's what responsible adults do. You don't panic, you act. 30 minutes later, her phone rang again. This time it wasn't him. It was a firefighter. "Ma'am," the voice asked, "are you okay?" She said she froze. "Why?" "There's been a crash. Your vehicle is here. It's totaled." Totaled. Not scratched, not dented. Totaled. And then the firefighter added something that changed everything. The keys were left in the driver's seat. Now pause there. If your car is stolen, the thief doesn't usually leave the keys behind neatly in the seat. Something didn't add up. She told the firefighter, "I don't even have the car. A friend borrowed it." He sent her pictures. Metal twisted like paper, front end crushed against a utility pole, airbags deployed, glass everywhere. Her stomach dropped again. But the worst part wasn't the damage. It was the lie. When she confronted him later, he stuck to his story. "Someone stole it," he insisted. He looked her in the eyes and said it. I've seen thousands of faces from this bench. There's a moment when truth and fear fight inside someone. Sometimes you can see it flicker across their eyes. But he stayed firm. Stolen. That was his story, and he kept it. Until she found something he didn't expect. There was a house near the crash site. The homeowner had security cameras. That homeowner happened to know her brother, and that camera recorded everything. She brought the footage into my courtroom. I asked her, "Have you shown this to him?" She shook her head. "No, Your Honor. When I confronted him, he still said it was stolen, so he never saw it." I turned to the defendant. "Did you crash the car?" "No, ma'am." Clear, confident, calm. "Do you understand," I said slowly, that reporting a crime that didn't happen is a felony. He nodded. Yes, ma'am. You could go to jail for that. I understand. I let that silence sit in the room. Sometimes silence is louder than shouting. Then I said, let's watch the tape. The courtroom grew still. On the screen, we saw her car driving down a residential street. It wasn't being chased. It wasn't being stolen. It was being driven normally by him. He was wearing a green jacket, the same one he wore in court. Then suddenly, impact. The car slammed into a utility pole. The pole cracked and began to fall. The airbags burst open. The car rolled slightly before stopping. And then the driver's door opened. He stepped out, looked around, and ran. Not in panic, not in confusion. He ran to another car that pulled up nearby. He jumped in, and that car drove away. He left her vehicle in the middle of the street. Keys inside, engine damaged, life disrupted. The courtroom was silent. You could feel the air shift. I turned to him slowly. Is that you? He swallowed. He didn't answer right away. That pause said everything. Finally, barely audible, he said, yes. In that moment, the lie collapsed. Not because he confessed, but because the truth stood on a screen 10 feet high. Now let's talk about the money. She had insurance, thank God. But insurance doesn't make you whole. Between what the insurance paid and what she still owed on her loan, there was a gap, $1,788. And she had a $1,000 deductible, plus months of scrambling for rides to work, paying coworkers for gas, missing hours, stress, embarrassment. That's what people forget. When you wreck someone's property, you don't just damage metal. You damage routine, security, dignity. She was suing for $2,999, not because she wanted revenge, but because she wanted to be made whole. Here's the turning point. I asked him one question. Why didn't you just tell her the truth? He stared down at the table. I panicked. That word again, panic. But panic doesn't last for weeks. Panic doesn't keep a lie alive. I leaned forward. You hit a pole. That's an accident. It's unfortunate, but it happens. What turned this into something worse was the lie. He wiped his face. I was scared, he said. Scared of what? Responsibility? Shame? Losing face at church? Sometimes people fear embarrassment more than they fear consequences. And that fear makes them dig deeper holes. I looked at her. She wasn't angry. She was hurt. That's different. Anger burns hot and fast. Hurt lingers. She said softly, I would have understood if he told me the truth. That sentence stayed with me. I would have understood. That's grace. That's maturity. That's someone who values honesty over perfection. He didn't just crash her car. He crashed her trust. And rebuilding trust is harder than paying a bill. My ruling was clear. He owed her $2,800. Accountability isn't punishment. It's restoration. He created the loss. He must repair it. That's justice. But before they left, something unexpected happened. He turned to her. For the first time that day, he looked her in the eyes. I'm sorry, he said. Not to me, to her. And it didn't sound forced. It sounded tired, real. She nodded. She didn't smile, but she nodded. Forgiveness doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's just choosing not to carry bitterness home. A few months later, I received a letter. Yes, sometimes people write to the court. She wrote that he had begun making payments as ordered, slowly, but consistently. And she wrote something else. They no longer spoke, not out of hatred, but out of understanding. Some relationships don't survive betrayal, and that's okay. Closure doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes closure means boundaries. If you're watching this today and you're over 50, you understand something younger people are still learning. Trust is precious. Reputation matters. Character is built in small choices. The choice to tell the truth. The choice to accept blame. The choice to make things right. We all make mistakes. Cars crash. People panic. But integrity Integrity is what you do next. Do you run, or do you stand still and face what you've done? Justice isn't about revenge. It's about balance. And compassion doesn't erase accountability. It walks beside it. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes in responsibility and second chances. And remember, the easiest way to protect your future is to protect your integrity today.